The rain poured relentlessly, a ceaseless drumbeat against the cracked pavement as David tightened his threadbare jacket against the biting cold. The wind howled, tugging at the hood of his raincoat and sending shivers down his spine. He pushed a squeaky grocery cart through the puddles, the wheels protesting with every turn. Beside him, his 6-year-old daughter, Emily, tugged at his hand, her pink rain boots splashing with innocent delight. She giggled, her laughter a bright contrast to the grey, oppressive sky. David glanced down at her, forcing a smile despite the weight of the unpaid bills and the eviction notice crumpled in his pocket. His mind raced with worry. Would he keep a roof over their heads? How would he explain to Emily that they might have to sleep in the car again? But for now, he pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on the small, warm hand in his. "Daddy, look!" Emily's voice broke through his thoughts, her tiny finger pointing across the street. David followed her gaze to a sleek black car with its hazard lights blinking. A woman stood beside it, holding a phone and shivering under a flimsy umbrella that did little to shield her from the downpour. Her designer coat was soaked and her heels sank into the muddy shoulder of the road. The unmistakable look of frustration and helplessness was etched on her face, her lips pressed into a thin line as she stared at her phone. David hesitated. He was already running late for a job interview, his first in weeks. This interview was his last hope, a chance to turn things around after months of unemployment. But then, Emily's tiny voice piped up again, soft but insistent. "She looks sad, Daddy. Maybe we can help?" David's heart clenched. He looked down at his daughter, her wide eyes filled with concern. How could he explain to her that they had so little to give? That stopping to help might cost him the job he desperately needed. But then he thought of the lessons he'd tried to teach her about kindness, about doing the right thing even when it was hard. With a sigh, he nodded. "Let's go see, kiddo." David and Emily crossed the street, the rain soaking through their clothes. Emily's boots splashed in the puddles, her laughter ringing out despite the dreary weather. David's shoes squelched with every step, the cold water seeping through the holes in the soles. As they approached the woman, she looked up, her expression a mix of relief and apprehension. "Flat tire?" David asked, his voice calm and steady despite the storm raging around them. "Yes," the woman replied, brushing damp hair from her face. Her hands trembled slightly. Whether from the cold or frustration, David couldn't tell. "I called roadside assistance, but they're taking forever, and I have an important meeting." She glanced at her watch, her frown deepening. David rolled up his sleeves, the fabric of his jacket clinging to his arms. "No need to wait. I can change it for you." The woman blinked, startled. "Are you sure? It's pouring, and you're with your daughter." She glanced at Emily, who was now holding the umbrella over her dad, her small hands gripping the handle tightly. David cut her off with a reassuring smile. "It's no trouble. I've done this 100 times. He knelt beside the car, his fingers already working to loosen the lug nuts. Emily stood beside him, her tiny frame barely able to hold the umbrella steady. "My daddy's really good at fixing things," Emily said cheerfully, her voice carrying over the sound of the rain. "He says kindness is free, so we should share it with everyone." The woman chuckled, her tension easing slightly. "You've got a smart kid there," she said, her voice softening. David worked quickly, his hands moving with practiced ease despite the rain. The woman watched him, her expression shifting from frustration to gratitude. In less than 15 minutes, the spare tire was on. David stood, soaked but smiling. "You're all set." The woman opened her wallet, pulling out a crisp $100 bill. "Let me pay you for your trouble." David shook his head, his smile never wavering. "No need. Just happy to help." She looked at him curiously, her eyes lingering on his worn-out shoes, the patched jacket, and the small hand clutching his. "At least let me give you a ride. You're soaked." David hesitated. "We're headed to an interview, actually." "Then all the more reason. Hop in," she insisted, her tone leaving no room for argument. Reluctantly, David agreed. The inside of the car was warm and dry, a stark contrast to the storm outside. David settled into the passenger seat, Emily perched on his lap, her wet raincoat dripping onto the leather upholstery. The woman, Claire Anderson, as she introduced her, adjusted the heat, her hands steady on the wheel. "So, where's the interview?" Claire asked, her tone casual but curious. David hesitated, unsure how much to share. "It's at a small office building downtown. Just a maintenance position, but it's something." Claire nodded, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror to catch a glimpse of Emily, who was now chatting excitedly about the adventure. "Your daughter's quite the chatterbox," she said with a smile. David chuckled, his hand resting on Emily's head. "She's my little ray of sunshine." As they drove, Claire's phone buzzed repeatedly, but she ignored it, her attention focused on the road. David couldn't help but notice the expensive watch on her wrist, the sleek design of the car's interior. This was a woman who was used to a life of luxury, a far cry from his own struggles. When they arrived at the small office building, Claire turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "What's your name?" she asked. "David," he replied, his voice steady. "David Miller." She nodded, pulling out a pen and a small notebook from her purse. "Here's my number," she said, scribbling it down, "in case you ever need anything, or, if I have another flat tire." David took the paper, his fingers brushing against hers. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. Claire smiled, her eyes softening. "No, thank you. You reminded me that there are still good people out there." David nodded, his heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and hope. He stepped out of the car, Emily in tow, and watched as Claire drove away, the sleek black car disappearing into the rain. 2 weeks passed, and the interview didn't go as David had hoped. The rejection letter arrived in the mail, a stark reminder of his failures. The eviction notice loomed closer, the date circled in red on the calendar. David sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands, the weight of his worries pressing down on him. Emily was in the living room, her laughter drifting through the small apartment as she played with her toys. David's heart ached at the sound. How could he explain to her that they might lose their home? That they might have to sleep in the car again? His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. He glanced at the screen, an unknown number. For a moment, he considered ignoring it, but something made him answer. "Hello, David. It's Claire Anderson. Do you have a moment to talk?" His heart raced. "Of course. I couldn't stop thinking about your kindness that day," Claire said, her voice warm and genuine. "I looked into your situation and found out you're an experienced mechanic. My company is opening a new branch, and we need someone trustworthy to lead the maintenance team. It's a salaried position with benefits. Interested?" David could barely breathe. "Are you serious?" "Very. And there's one more thing," Claire added. "I've set up a scholarship fund for Emily. She'll have the opportunity to go to any college she chooses when the time comes." Tears filled David's eyes as he stammered his thanks. A month later, David stood in front of his new team, wearing a crisp uniform with the company logo embroidered on it. The maintenance bay was bustling with activity, the hum of machinery and the clang of tools filling the air. Emily beamed from the break room, munching on a snack provided by the company daycare. As he walked to his car after his first successful day, David found a note tucked under the wiper blade. It read, **, kindness is free, but its impact is priceless. Thank you for reminding me of that. Claire **. David looked up at the sky, the setting sun breaking through the clouds. His act of kindness had changed the course of his life, proving that sometimes the smallest gestures can create the biggest ripples. And in that moment, he knew that no matter how tough life seemed, leading with a generous heart would always light the way forward.